What was the main thing the trespassing Daily Mail reporter was told? Do you remember?
Leaving.
Shut your face!
Right, she's told to shut your face. She's being shut down. 6 weeks after Gus Lamont apparently vanished in the early evening of September 27th, the Daily Mail have provided a handy summary, a short story, if you will, summarizing the case so far. It's co-written by Jonica Bray, the same woman who had a close encounter with Gus's fiery grandmother, Josie. She writes, "The missing boy seems to have barely left his home in the 6 months leading up to the day he vanished. The only people who had seen him alive during that period were the ones who then reported him missing. A casual observer might find this peculiar, but in the Australian outback, geography dictates that families can live very secluded lives."
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. There are some who speculate that Madeleine McCann disappeared a day or even a week before her reported disappearance. While I find that theory outlandish for several obvious reasons, I find this one, although unlikely, not implausible. Gus's father, Josh, probably saw Gus in the last 6 months, and just because he isn't speaking at the moment doesn't mean the Daily Mail's 6-month guess is true. But it does raise, I think, some very interesting thoughts in terms of the psychology surrounding these really huge farms and the people who live on them. They are like islands, essentially laws unto themselves. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. I'll give you a moment to hit the subscribe button. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button, and I'll give you a moment to do that. And let's get started. Locals say that Josie transitioned in 2015, around the time Shannon's father, Vincent, a Second World War hero who'd ran the ranch for several decades, died. Now I find that information really interesting. And what this shows is that Josie, formerly Robert, right, previously Robert, kept who he or she really was a secret for much of his or her life. And then at a particular time, when the coast was clear in a sense, when Shannon's father had died, Josie finally revealed her true colors. Josie finally kind of became who she really was. Now, what this shows to me is a dynamic that is both fiercely patriarchal and also that there's a authoritative dynamic that sort of runs the show. The patriarchy shows that men run the show in this part of the outback and sort of rule with an iron fist. Now, I'm not from this part of the outback. I'm not even Australian. I have visited Australia. Do you think that assessment is true? Do you think that observation is broadly and basically accurate? The authoritative dynamic shows to what extent they are a law unto themselves. And I think when the reporter approached the property, one could feel and sense that law playing out. In a setting like this, if there are secrets, people know their place and want to keep their place, and they know how to keep them. They know how to keep secrets. Like Robert once upon a time. I've said it before, the scenario with the snake reveals a lot more about the underlying psychology than many appreciate, and I believe it may be intertextual to the incident itself. And the Daily Mail have highlighted this as well. That explanation about brandishing a shotgun at a snake raised several questions. Firstly, snakes are protected in South Australia. Didn't that make it illegal for Murray to shoot one? And this is what I mean by a law unto themselves. It seems out here, whatever the person in charge says goes. Secondly, are pump-action shotguns an appropriate tool for dispatching a reptile at close range? Now, I've spoken to a local person who says, no, you would more likely use a shovel, and you certainly wouldn't you wouldn't fire into your porch given the risk of a ricochet. So clearly, shotguns aren't an appropriate tool in this particular situation at close range. And so if the story of the snake is a tall tale, what else isn't true? And is there some truth to the idea that Gus disappeared quite a while ago? This would explain an almost complete absence not only of his shoe prints but of Gus himself. And if he did disappear earlier than the 27th, it raises the question, why raise the alarm on the 27th? Well, I have mentioned previously that on the 27th there was this big sports event, and a lot of people would have been distracted by that, and perhaps someone was aware that this was the best time to bring up something that would quickly be forgotten. Now, another question is, when was Gus's father due to visit his son again? And how did Josie feel about Josh constantly coming around to see or pick up Gus? And was there perhaps a feeling that, well, if Gus is no longer around, well, then Josh will no longer be coming around either? Did Josie perhaps feel the same way about Josh as he did about the reporter arriving at their doorstep uninvited? Then, according to the Daily Mail, if dangerous snakes really are in the habit of taking up residence on the porch at this particular sheep station, why did the family allow their 4-year-old child to play unsupervised outside on the day that he vanished? And so that makes one wonder, is that story even true? The police have yet to address any of these points, just as they are refusing to comment on the question of when Gus was last seen by anyone outside his immediate family. Additionally, the police claim they don't deserve any criticism, but on the issue of the snake on the porch, I felt their response was quite weak. In the same way, their ongoing theory that Gus wandered off is also seeming to be a pretty weak theory as well. There's also a weird mismatch in this story. What we do know for sure is that Josie cuts an unorthodox figure. The family have since led largely unremarkable lives. However, locals say the years since Gus's birth brought some conflict between the generations. Now, I'm not sure if their lives are so unremarkable after all. Josie isn't typical, and I think that's an understatement. Josie's very atypical for this part of Australia. Josh and Jess's relationship is also remarkable, in large part. Why? Because of Josie. And do you notice Josie's name keeps coming up? And I do wonder if when Josie was a man, whether that meant that Josie would inherit Vincent's estate. And if Josie had changed before that and become a woman, would Vincent still have left his estate to Josie? I don't know whether he did. Maybe he left it to Shannon. But that is another question, is who does this property belong to at the end of the day? And isn't that person calling the shots in this case? Friends of Josh say that he had spent extended periods of time at Oak Park Station but moved out a couple of years ago due to a personality clash with Josie. Now one wonders what exactly led to that personality clash. Was it the birth of Gus that sort of led to that? He and Jess have since enjoyed a complex love life, described by one acquaintance as a sort of commuter relationship where they remain a couple but largely live in different homes. And this, I think, is interesting. Josh is in a way the only man in this equation, and he's treated as a pariah. And then something happens to his son, and he's still not informed about it. Not even his own wife calls him. And then, according to the article, all of which brings us back to Josh Lamont's house and the calendar hanging on the wall. One of the last appointments it lists for March was term starts, presumably marking the introduction days for Gus at a local nursery school, where he was due to start full-time in January. Importantly, that trial day was the occasion when the official police photo of Gus in a grey and blue Peppa Pig t-shirt appears to have been taken. Now that is a stunning insight all of its own, because besides the weird silence coming from the family, which is mismatched to the shouting determinism of Josie, Josie's clearly not a shrinking violet. Josie's clearly isn't shy when she wants to be, unless she wants to be. There's also a weird lack of involvement from the family, including providing just this one photo of Gus. And it seems to be an old photo. We saw something similar with John Bonet and Madeline. If you didn't know any better, you'd say the failure to provide other photos wasn't it to make the job of figuring out what happened harder, not easier? And is that the case here? The Daily Mail also notes, as far as we can establish, that nursery school visit also represents the last time anyone outside of the child's immediate family can remember seeing him. The Daily Mail has visited almost every property in Junta, the nearest town to Oak Park Station, populated by only 60 people. While many residents knew the Murray family and were aware that Jessica had 2 children, no one could recall catching a glimpse of the boy since he was a baby. One thing is for sure, we are dealing with a group of people here who know how to keep secrets, know how to keep their mouths shut, and do as they're told. And in this case, they seem to have been told one thing.
I was leaving.
Shut your face and get out!
What do you think? Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.